After 9 years, you know what I realized? Ignorance is bliss.
Did you know I was personally dragged into the whistleblowing about the sexual abuse, trafficking of vulnerable women at the non-profit organization with a false accusation by the female central to my story? I had support from some famous people like...
One man told me about being beaten by the police and left permanently disabled because of a woman's false allegation.
Hello, it's December 2025. Now, this video is going to be discussing something that for some it may be still to this day controversial for some reason. And it's really inspired by my observing how people are bringing this topic back up, saying never forget. Now that could mean anything with what I'm about to talk about. Now around 2020 into 2021, there was a time where people were posting, for example, hospital staff, doctors, nurses, primarily nurses, dancing in various parts of a hospital. Now I'm not going to be getting into the issues, the controversy, or whatever took place that began in 2020 and all that nonsense. I'm not going down that path. And I'm not really wanting to focus on, for example, the dancing hospital staff, although it's going to be the foundation to my point. Now, one of the things that even I observed at the time, and I may have mentioned this in a video or two back then, which wouldn't be found on this platform, how everything really seemed to be choreographed. And everyone was talking about where did they find the time? And not just that, but the quality of the video and how everything just seems to be professionally done. These hospital staff dancing. Now there were some amateur footage that came out afterwards, and what's interesting is how the amateur footage, the people within that either got into serious trouble or they were fired. Nurses and doctors and other staff in the hospital. But most of the footage that came out was professionally done. Now I try to research this to some degree here to see if there's anyone who had come out saying, yeah, they were actors or something, and there's literally nothing. The only thing you could find are these videos. So really this is observation of not just by myself, but countless of other people. Why did this event take place? And it all began and focused on one online platform. Now what's very interesting is after the months that this took place, that platform had made millions, perhaps billions of dollars, and ended up donating a substantial amount of money to, we'll say, a cause at the time. Now, what can be speculated here is, again, speculated, that this platform had these videos ready or had created those videos after the events began to make money. And there's even talk about how, and there's apparently some evidence in some of these videos, how these videos were actually made prior to 2020. Now, why would they be released then after 2020? Were they made prior to 2020 for that? I mean, you can speculate all day long. And once again, I'm going to highlight how there's not enough information to make a properly informed conclusion. All we can go by is what little tidbits that we can observe and know. And keep in mind, everything that is presented, for example, on the internet, is allowed to be made known. Nothing is left for chance. And I'm just going to segue for a moment. When truther and freedom types are researching online, and there's a lot of new, for example, or newer influencers, or what I used to call online celebrities, popping up like mushrooms, talking about stuff that they've researched and then giving their opinions or theories and stuff. And people are sharing their content like crazy. And you have to ask yourself, if these people were even remotely close to the truth or a threat, would you be even hearing from them? As I've said, there's plenty of people, for example, like myself, that you've never heard of and are programmed not to care about. I digress. So what is my point then? If it's not really about these dancing hospital staff, nurses and stuff, and how everything was choreographed, well, really, let me just stop there for a second and correct myself. It partly has to do with things being choreographed, because everything is controlled. And now we're going to get into probably more of the meat and potatoes of this topic, is what was the psyop of that being released when it was. Regardless of when it was made, prior or during the events in 2020 when it all began and everything else, what was the benefit, we'll say, as a descriptive? What we see is we see a split. We see people becoming very irate in both camps, for example, because people who bought into the official narrative of what began in 2020 are saying, look, they're being so carefree and happy that bodies are mounting, piling up everywhere all around them, which we don't see anywhere, but not going down that path. So there's people being irate with that, and then there's people being irate with how they're just putting out all these videos. And we hear videos, for example, of staff telling a whole different story about what was really happening. And during all this time, we also had, for a time anyway, something called #FilmYourHospital. And if you're not familiar with that, look that up too, because that's very interesting. And we had people also, aside from being irate on the other end, being happy, because they're saying, look, they're in the middle of a war zone, as a descriptive that they use, and they're trying to release the tension and find something joyful or whatever, be positive. So we see a fragmentation from just that among the people, how people are divided up. And the ones that became angry, and there's also on that other side, people becoming angry, for example, with how everything, they didn't buy into the narrative, and then how they're putting this stuff out, and they're just basically, as they would say, truthers and freedom types, they're just throwing it in our face. Really, the big thing, the big push was the anger. And that whole psyop ran its course and accomplished what it had to. But what I find really interesting here is now people are still posting, for example, screenshots or photos with the captions written, "Never forget." Never forget what exactly? Because I just gave several examples of different perspectives from different groups on how they viewed all that. So what are we not forgetting? Perhaps these memes are just a continuation of that particular psyop. And then there's innocent people thinking, this is how I interpret it, and this is what it means to me, and they're sharing it, being voluntarily continuing the psyop, doing it to themselves. So what can you take from all this? Don't buy into anything. Nothing. We can't, in today's world, especially now, we can't really trust anything. Even what we see with our own eyes, for example, in the video, we don't know if it's AI generated. And people are always talking about, for example, these holograms and how the holograms are so realistic now that they can do it in a crowd of people in real life and people wouldn't know. Yeah, people would know. And that in itself is a psyop to distract people and have people question and doubt everything. And that is the number one objective, for people to doubt everything. So when someone does come along with the truth, whether it be something as a descriptive supernatural or as another descriptive earthly, people are not going to believe anything. And people are going to default and err on the side of caution, and that is the trap. Just some things to think about. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
Take ownership. Take extreme ownership. Don't hide your delicate pride from the truth. Take ownership of everything in your world, the good and the bad.
Just remember, I was one man against many. Fighting a losing battle, but I still fought to the end.
That means press on. That means endure. That means God cannot fail, and you're not going to give up. That's not an option for a child of God. This means you are going to be remembered. Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people say, oh, when is it going to get easier? When you die.